Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the broken pipe in front of him. He had been working on this section of the station for 3 hours now. The metal was old and the seals kept breaking. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Jake was a maintenance technician on Horizon's Edge, a massive space station that floated between Earth and the outer colonies. Thousands of people lived here. Humans mostly, but also aliens from dozens of different worlds. Jake had been here for 2 years now. He knew every corridor, every broken panel, and every shortcut through the station. He picked up his welding tool and got back to work. The blue flame hissed as he sealed another crack in the pipe. His mind wandered as he worked. He thought about dinner. He thought about the game of cards he had planned with his friend Chris later that night. He thought about home, far away on Earth, where his mother still sent him messages every week asking when he would visit. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Jake turned his head slightly and saw someone walking down the corridor. He could tell by the way she moved, smooth and graceful, like she was floating instead of walking. They were one of the most respected species in the galaxy. They were telepaths, able to read minds and share thoughts without speaking. Humans found them a little scary, to be honest. It was hard to relax around someone who might be reading your thoughts. This particular was female. Jake had seen her around the station a few times in the past week. Someone had told him she was the new cultural liaison, sent to improve relations between humans and her people. Her name was, or something like that. Jake was not very good with alien names. She walked past him and Jake found himself looking at her. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to glow faintly from within. They had large eyes that changed color with their mood. They did not look anything like humans, really. But there was something about the way this one walked, something about her shape. Jake's brain, without his permission, formed a thought, a very inappropriate thought, a thought about her backside specifically, about how surprisingly nice it looked, about how he had not expected it to have such a... He stopped himself. He shook his head and turned back to his work. What was wrong with him? That was not a professional thought. That was not even a polite thought. He was glad that his brain was his own private space where no one could hear his stupid ideas. Except it was not. Jake did not know it, but his neural implant had malfunctioned 3 days ago. The implant was a small device in his head that helped humans work with alien technology. It translated languages, connected to station systems, and helped with communication. What it was not supposed to do was broadcast his surface thoughts on a telepathic frequency. But that was exactly what it was doing now. Stopped walking. She stood completely still in the middle of the corridor. Her large eyes, which had been a calm blue, slowly shifted to a bright purple. Among her people, purple meant surprise, deep surprise. She turned around and looked at Jake. He was still welding, completely unaware of what had just happened. He was humming a little song to himself, thinking about what he would have for dinner. Tilted her head to one side. She had heard human thoughts before, of course. Humans were what her people called mentally loud. They had no natural shields, no way to keep their thoughts private. Most telepaths learn to ignore the background noise of human minds, the same way humans learn to ignore the sound of air systems or distant conversations. But this was different. This human had not just thought something. He had broadcast it, clearly, directly, on the frequency her people used for intimate communication. It was the frequency used for courtship, for sharing one's deepest truths without protection or shame. Among the doing this was a big deal, a very big deal. It was called the sharing of unguarded thought. It was how her people began their most serious relationships. To share an unguarded thought was to say, here I am, completely honest, completely vulnerable. Judge me if you want. I am hiding nothing. And this human had just done it, about her body, about her backside specifically. Was not sure how to feel. Part of her was offended. Part of her was confused. But another part of her, a part she did not expect, was impressed. Humans were supposed to be shy about such things. They wore clothes to hide their bodies. They used careful words to hide their thoughts, yet this one had just announced his attraction to her as clearly as a shout. Was it bravery? Was it a cultural difference? Was it some kind of human courtship ritual she had not learned about yet? She walked toward him. Her footsteps were quiet on the metal floor. Jake did not notice her until she was standing right next to him. He looked up, surprised, and quickly turned off his welding tool. "Oh, hello," he said, smiling politely. "Can I help you with something?" Studied his face. He looked calm, friendly. There was no sign of embarrassment or nervousness. Either he was very brave or he had no idea what he had done. "I received your transmission," she said. Her voice was soft and musical like wind through leaves. Jake blinked. "My transmission? I didn't send any transmission. Are you looking for the communications office? It's on level 7, third corridor on the left." She shook her head slowly. "Not that kind of transmission, your thought. I heard your thought." Jake's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes showed confusion. "My thought? I don't understand. I was just working here. I wasn't thinking about anything important." His eyes shifted to a lighter shade of purple. This human really did not know. He had no idea that his mind was broadcasting. He had no idea that he had just initiated one of the most sacred rituals of her people. "We should discuss this formally," she said. "There are procedures to follow." Jake nodded slowly, still confused but trying to be helpful. "Sure, okay. If you need something fixed, I'm happy to help. Just tell me where and when." "Tomorrow, conference room 4. Bring nothing, the discussion will be personal." She turned and walked away before Jake could ask any more questions. He watched her go, still holding his welding tool, still completely unaware that his life was about to become very complicated. That night, Jake told his friend Chris about the strange encounter. Chris laughed and said it was probably nothing. Maybe she just needed help with her door panel or something. Jake agreed. It was probably nothing. He was very, very wrong. Jake arrived at conference room for the next morning. He had put on his cleanest uniform and combed his hair. He still thought this was about some kind of maintenance request. Maybe the liaison needed help with alien technology that was not working with the station's human systems. That happened sometimes. The door slid open and Jake stepped inside. Then he stopped. The room was not empty. There were at least 15 people sitting around the large oval table. Half of them were human, including Captain Lisa Monroe, who ran the station. The other half were dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like water. They all turned to look at Jake when he entered. Jake said, "I think I might be in the wrong room." Stood up from her seat. "You are in the correct room. Please sit down." Jake walked slowly to the only empty chair. It was at the head of the table facing everyone. He sat down and folded his hands in his lap. His heart was beating fast now. Something was wrong. This did not feel like a maintenance meeting. Captain Monroe leaned forward. "Mister, do you know why you're here?" "No, ma'am," Jake said honestly. "I really don't." Stepped forward. Her eyes were a calm green today, which Jake hoped was a good sign. He had read somewhere that green meant thoughtful or curious. "Yesterday," she began, "you transmitted a thought to me, a private thought, an unguarded thought." Jake felt his stomach drop. What?" "Your neural implant has malfunctioned. It is broadcasting your surface thoughts on a telepathic frequency, a frequency my people use for intimate communication." The room was very quiet. Jake could hear his own breathing. He could feel sweat forming on his back. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I swear I didn't know. I would never, I wasn't trying to, it was an accident." One of the officials raised his hand. He was older than the others, with lines on his face and eyes that were a deep, serious gray. "The content of the thought is not in question. What matters is the act itself." Jake swallowed hard. "The act? What act? I just thought something. People think things all the time. It's not like I said anything out loud." Sat down across from him. Among my people, thoughts are more real than words. Words can be chosen carefully. Thoughts cannot. What you did yesterday, broadcasting an unguarded thought directly to me, is what we call the sharing of unguarded thought. It is one of our oldest traditions. A tradition for what? Jake asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Courtship. The word hung in the air like a physical object. Jake felt his face getting hot. He looked around the table at all the serious faces watching him. Courtship, he repeated. You mean like dating, romance? More than that, the older said. The sharing of unguarded thought is how our most serious relationships begin. It is a declaration, a statement that says, I have nothing to hide from you. I offer you my true self without protection. Jake wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He had accidentally started an alien courtship ritual by thinking about someone's butt. This was not how he expected his Tuesday to go. I am so sorry, he said. This is all a big misunderstanding. My implant was broken. I had no idea it was broadcasting. I never meant to offend anyone or start any kind of ritual. It was just a stupid thought that I shouldn't have had in the first place. He looked at, I apologize to you especially. That was not appropriate. I'm really, really sorry. There was a long pause. Then something unexpected happened. They started murmuring to each other, not in anger but in what sounded like admiration. The older one nodded slowly, his gray eyes softening to a lighter shade. Remarkable, he said, truly remarkable. Captain Monroe looked as confused as Jake felt. I'm sorry, but could someone explain what's happening? Smiled, it was a small smile, but it was real. He apologized. He admitted his thought was inappropriate. He took responsibility for it. And that's remarkable, the captain asked. Among telepaths, yes, very remarkable. Turned to face the rest of the room. When someone shares an unguarded thought, they usually defend it. They argue that their feeling was justified. They explain why the other person should accept it. To apologize, to say the thought was wrong while still acknowledging it was real, that requires a kind of honesty we rarely see. The older leaned back in his chair. Humans are known to be mentally loud. We have always seen this as a weakness. You cannot shield your thoughts. You cannot hide what you feel. But perhaps we have misunderstood. Perhaps your inability to hide is actually a form of courage. Jake was not sure he understood. I'm not courageous. I just can't read minds or protect my thoughts. I'm not brave, I'm just limited. Are you? Asked. Every day you walk among telepaths knowing that your thoughts might be heard. Every day you interact with species who can see your feelings, your fears, your embarrassments. Yet you still function. You still work. You still make friends and live your life. Do you have any idea how terrifying that sounds to someone who has always been able to hide? Jake had never thought about it that way. To him, it was just normal life. He could not do anything about his lack of telepathic shields, so he did not worry about it. But from her perspective, he was walking around naked every day, and he did not even seem to care. The meeting continued for another hour. They asked Jake many questions about human culture, about how his people handled honesty, about what they did when they thought inappropriate things. Jake answered as best as he could. He explained that humans often thought things they were ashamed of, and they usually just ignored those thoughts and moved on. He explained that words mattered more than thoughts in human culture, because words were a choice. By the end of the meeting, something strange had happened. They were not angry, they were fascinated. As people began to leave, walked over to Jake. I would like to continue our conversation, if you are willing. Jake hesitated. You're not mad at me. I was surprised. I was confused, but I am not mad. Her eyes shifted to a warm yellow. You are the first human who has ever shared an unguarded thought with me. Accident or not, that means something to my people. I would like to understand you better. Jake nodded slowly. Okay, I guess I could do that, as long as there are no more meetings with 15 people staring at me. Laughed. It was a beautiful sound, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Outside the conference room, Jake's friend Chris was waiting. He had heard about the meeting from someone in communications. So Chris asked, "What happened? Are you in trouble?" Jake shook his head, still looking a little stunned. "I'm not sure. I think I might have accidentally become famous, or engaged, or both." Chris stared at him. "What?" "It's a long story," Jake said. "I need a drink." They walked toward the station bar together, and Jake began to explain. By the time he finished, Chris was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "Only you," Chris said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Only you could turn a broken implant into an incident." Jake sighed. He had a feeling this was just the beginning. Jake thought the whole thing would blow over in a few days. He was wrong, very wrong. Within a week, the story had spread across the entire station. Within 2 weeks, it had reached other stations and colonies. Within a month, Jake was one of the most talked about humans in the sector. He did not understand why. To him, it was just an embarrassing accident. He had thought something stupid, his broken implant had broadcast it, and he had apologized. End of story. But to the rest of the galaxy, it was much more than that. They had started talking. They told other species about the human who had shared an unguarded thought. They explained how he had admitted his thought was inappropriate while still acknowledging it was real. They described how he walked among telepaths every day without any mental protection, and how he did not seem to think this was special or brave. Other telepathic species became curious. A race of scientists known for their massive brains and cold logic sent a representative to the station just to meet Jake. A warrior species with limited telepathic abilities asked for an official report on the incident. Jake was confused by all the attention. He was just a maintenance worker. He fixed pipes and cleaned filters. He was not a diplomat or a scientist or anyone important. But the alien delegations did not care about his job. They cared about his mind. Or rather, they cared about his lack of mental shields. The representative was named something Jake could not pronounce, so he called her Dr. Gray because of her gray skin. She was tall and thin, with a head that was slightly too large for her body. She studied Jake like he was a bug under a microscope. "Fascinating," she said, walking around him in circles. "You truly have no ability to shield your thoughts." "No," Jake said. "Humans can't do that. We just think things and they stay in our heads, usually. Yet you function normally. You form relationships. You work efficiently. You do not seem traumatized by your vulnerability." Dr. Gray stopped in front of him. "How do you manage it?" Jake shrugged. "I don't know, I just live my life. I can't change what I am, so I don't worry about it." Dr. Gray's large eyes blinked slowly. "Remarkable. Among my people, losing one's mental shields would be considered a fate worse than death, yet you treat it as nothing." "It's not nothing," Jake said. "It's just normal for us, I mean. We've always been this way. We didn't lose anything. We never had it in the first place." Dr. Gray nodded and made notes on a small device. "I have a theory. Your species evolved without telepathy. This means you had to develop other ways to survive. You had to learn to trust each other even though you could not read minds. You had to build societies based on words and actions instead of thoughts and feelings. In a way, your weakness became your strength." Jake was not sure he followed. How is being mentally naked a strength? "Because you cannot lie effectively," Dr. Gray said. "Oh, you can speak false words, but your thoughts, your true feelings, they are always visible to those who can see. This means other species know they can trust you. Not trust your words, perhaps, but trust your nature. You are exactly what you appear to be. There is no hidden layer, no secret agenda that you are keeping locked away." This was the first time Jake had ever thought about humanity this way. He had always assumed that humans were at a disadvantage among telepathic species. They could not compete in mental battles. They could not hide their strategies or their fears. but Dr. Gray was suggesting that this openness was actually valuable. The ambassador, a large being covered in thick scales, had a similar view. His name was, and he met Jake in one of the station's lounges. "My people respect strength," said. His voice was deep and rumbling like distant thunder. "For many years we saw humans as weak. Soft bodies, short lives, no mental protection. How could such creatures survive?" "We ask ourselves that sometimes," Jake said with a small smile. Laughed, it sounded like rocks grinding together. "But now I understand. Your weakness is a different kind of strength. You cannot hide your fear, so you have learned to act despite it. You cannot hide your doubts, so you have learned to move forward anyway. You are like warriors who fight naked. No armor, no shields, just courage." Jake thought about this. He supposed it was true in a way. Humans did things even when they were scared. They took risks even when they knew they might fail. Maybe it was because they could not hide from their own feelings, so they had to face them. Word continued to spread. Reports were written. Studies were conducted. Slowly, the galaxy's view of humanity began to change. Before, humans had been seen as a young species, barely worth noticing. They were loud, messy, emotional, and mentally primitive. They could not compete with the ancient races who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. But now, a new idea was taking hold. Humans were not primitive. They were different. Their inability to hide made them uniquely honest. Their lack of mental shields made them uniquely brave. They were a species that had evolved to face the universe with nothing to protect them except their own determination. Some called it human courage, others called it human madness. Either way, everyone was talking about it. And it had all started because Jake thought someone had a nice butt. Found Jake sitting alone in the observation deck one evening. He was staring out at the stars, looking a little lost. "You seem troubled," she said, sitting down next to him. "I don't understand what's happening," Jake admitted. "I'm nobody. I fix toilets and repair wiring. Now suddenly everyone acts like I'm some kind of symbol for my whole species." His eyes were a gentle blue, the color of calm water. "You did not ask for this attention, I know that. But what happened between us opened a door. For a long time my people and yours have been polite to each other but not close. We did not understand you. We thought your mental openness was a flaw, something to pity. And now we see it differently. Your openness is not a flaw, it is who you are. And who you are is someone who can admit mistakes, face embarrassment, and keep moving forward. That is rare, Jake. That is valuable." Jake turned to look at her. In the starlight, her glowing skin looked beautiful. He caught himself thinking that, and then he remembered that she could probably hear him thinking it. "Sorry," he said automatically. Smiled. "Do not apologize for finding me beautiful. Among my people, that is a compliment. Even if I think it instead of saying it. Especially then, spoken words can be empty, thoughts are always true." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars drift past. Jake did not know what the future held. He did not know if this new attention was a good thing or a bad thing. But sitting here, next to someone who seemed to actually understand him, he felt okay. Maybe being mentally naked was not so bad after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was the most human thing about him. 3 months had passed since the incident. Jake's life had become something he never expected. He still worked as a maintenance technician, still fixed pipes and repaired broken systems. But now he also received messages from scientists and diplomats across the sector. He had been asked to speak at 2 conferences. A documentary crew wanted to interview him. He had said no to all of it. He was not a public speaker. He was not comfortable being famous. He just wanted to do his job and live his life. But there was one thing he could not say no to. She visited him almost every day now. Sometimes they ate meals together. Sometimes they walked through the station's gardens, a large section filled with plants from a dozen different worlds. Sometimes they just sat and talked, sharing stories about their homes, their families, their dreams. Jake found himself looking forward to these visits more than anything else, was different from anyone he had ever met. She was curious about everything. She asked questions that made him think about things he had never considered. She laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones. And she never judged him for his thoughts, not once. One evening, they were sitting in the garden under a tree that had purple leaves and smelled like honey. Had been quieter than usual, her eyes shifting between colors in a way Jake had learned meant she was thinking deeply about something. "I need to tell you something," she finally said. Jake felt a small knot of worry form in his stomach. "Okay, what is it?" "Among my people, what you did 3 months ago was not just a greeting or a compliment. The sharing of unguarded thought is the first step in a formal courtship process. When I reported the incident to my superiors, they registered it officially." Jake blinked. "Registered it? What does that mean?" "It means that, according to law, you and I are in the early stages of a courtship. Not a marriage, not yet, but a formal recognition that there is a potential bond between us." Jake sat very still. He was trying to understand what she was saying. "So we're dating, officially, according to your government." "Something like that, yes." "Because of one thought I had about your butt." His eyes flickered with amusement. "When you say it that way, it does sound strange." Jake let out a long breath. He ran his hand through his hair, a habit he had when he was stressed. "That thought was an accident. My implant was broken. I never meant to start any kind of courtship. You know that." "I know." Her voice was soft. "And I have been thinking about this for a long time. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Completely honest." "I'm always honest with you. I can't really help it." She smiled at that. "I know, that is why I trust you." She turned to face him fully. "The accident started this courtship, but it does not have to continue. Under law, you can withdraw at any time. You can say that it was a mistake, that you have no romantic interest in me, and it will end. No one will think less of you. No one will be angry." Jake looked at her. Her eyes were a pale silver, a color he had never seen on her before. He wondered what it meant. "Is that what you want?" he asked. "Do you want me to withdraw?" She was silent for a moment. "What I want is complicated. When this first happened, I was confused and a little annoyed. A human of all species had started a courtship with me. It felt random, like a joke played by the universe." "I understand," Jake said, feeling his heart sink a little. "But then I got to know you," she continued. "I learned about your people, your way of thinking, your way of living. I learned about you, Jake. Your kindness, your humor, your honesty. And I found myself enjoying our time together, looking forward to it even." Jake's heart did something strange in his chest. It felt like it was beating too fast and too slow at the same time. "I am not saying I am in love with you," said carefully. "My people do not use that word lightly. But I am saying that I do not want you to withdraw. Not yet. I want to see where this goes." Jake did not know what to say. He had never expected this. When the whole thing started, he thought he had made a huge mistake. He thought he had offended an important alien diplomat and caused an incident. He never imagined that it might lead to something real. "I don't know anything about courtship," he finally said. "I don't know the rules or the traditions. I'm just a guy who fixes things." "I can teach you," said, "if you want to learn." Jake thought about it. He thought about the past 3 months, about all the conversations they had shared, all the moments that had made him smile. He thought about how, somewhere along the way, he had started thinking of her as more than just an alien he happened to know. He thought of her as a friend, maybe more than a friend. "Okay," he said, "teach me." His eyes shifted to a warm golden color, like sunlight through amber. Jake had learned that gold meant happiness. "The next step in courtship is called the formal sharing," she explained. "It is more serious than what happened before. In the formal sharing, you stand before witnesses and deliberately share an unguarded thought. not by accident but by choice. What kind of thought? Any thought that shows your true self. It could be about me, about us, about anything. The content matters less than the honesty. You are showing the witnesses that you are willing to be vulnerable, to be seen without protection. Jake nodded slowly. And what happens after that? Then I respond. I share my own unguarded thought with you, and the witnesses judge whether the bond between us is real or artificial. If it is real, we move to the next stage. If it is not, the courtship ends. Jake's friend Chris had told him he was either the bravest or dumbest human in the galaxy. Right now, Jake thought Chris might be right on both counts. When does this happen? Jake asked. Whenever you are ready, there is no rush. Jake looked at the purple tree above them, at the alien stars visible through the garden's glass ceiling, at the woman sitting beside him who was unlike anyone he had ever known. I'll do it, he said. I don't know what thought I'll share, but I'll figure it out. I want to see where this goes too. Reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was warm, warmer than he expected. Thank you, Jake, for being willing to try. Thank you for giving me a chance, he replied, even after I started this whole thing by thinking about your butt. She laughed, that beautiful wind chime sound. You are never going to let that go, are you? Never, Jake promised. It's the best mistake I ever made. The day of the formal sharing arrived on a Tuesday. Jake thought it was funny that the most important moment of his life was happening on such an ordinary day. He stood in front of a mirror in his small quarters, adjusting his collar for the 100th time. He was wearing his best clothes, a simple dark suit that his mother had sent from Earth. She did not know what it was for. He had not told his family about any of this yet. He was not sure how to explain that he was in an alien courtship ritual because of a thought about someone's backside. There was a knock at his door. It was Chris. You ready? Chris asked, looking at his friend with a mixture of concern and excitement. No, Jake said honestly, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's the spirit. Chris clapped him on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. I've seen you with her. You light up when she's around. Jake smiled. Thanks, Chris, that means a lot. They walked together to the ceremonial hall. It was a large room on the station's upper level, usually used for diplomatic events. Today, it had been prepared for the formal sharing. The walls were decorated with flowing fabrics in blue and gold, the colors of tradition. Soft music played from somewhere, strange and beautiful sounds that Jake did not recognize. The room was filled with people, humans, and sat together in curved rows, facing a raised platform at the front. Jake recognized some of the faces. Captain Monroe was there. Dr. Gray from the had come back for this event. Even the had taken a seat in the back, his large body barely fitting in the chair. And at the front of the room, standing on the platform, was. She was wearing a gown made of material that seemed to flow like water and shine like starlight. Her hair, which was not really hair but thin tendrils of glowing fiber, had been arranged in an elaborate pattern. Her eyes were a color Jake had never seen before, something between purple and gold, shifting slowly like a sunset. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He thought that clearly, loudly, not caring who might hear. An older, the same one from the first meeting months ago, gestured for Jake to come forward. Jake walked up the aisle between the seated guests. His heart was pounding. His hands were slightly damp with sweat, but he did not stop. He climbed the steps to the platform and stood facing. We are gathered here to witness a formal sharing, the elder announced. His voice was calm and steady. Jake, human of Earth, has entered a courtship with of the. Today, he will share an unguarded thought by choice, not by accident. The truth of his heart will be revealed. The elder turned to Jake. Normally, this ritual is performed between two telepaths. You are not a telepath. You have no natural ability to project your thoughts. For this reason, we will use technology to help you. Another approached carrying a small device. It looked like a simple headband made of silver metal. Jake had been told about this. It would temporarily amplify his brainwaves, making his surface thoughts audible to every telepath in the room. He put on the headband. It was cool against his skin. "When you are ready," the elder said, "close your eyes and think. Think whatever is in your heart. We will hear you." Jake closed his eyes. The room went silent. Even the music stopped. For a moment his mind was blank. He was too nervous, too aware of everyone watching him. What was he supposed to think? What did he really feel? He took a deep breath and tried to relax. He stopped worrying about the audience, the ritual, the importance of this moment. He just thought about her. He thought about the first time he saw her, walking down that corridor. He thought about how confused and embarrassed he had been when he learned what his broken implant had done. He thought about their first real conversation, how surprised he was to find that she was funny and warm and nothing like he had expected. He thought about the meals they shared, the walks through the garden, the long talks under purple trees. He thought about how she made the cold metal station feel like somewhere he wanted to be. He thought about how, for the first time since leaving Earth, he did not feel alone. He thought about fear, too. He was scared of this. Scared of being vulnerable, of being judged, of being rejected. He was scared that he was not good enough for her, that he was just a simple maintenance worker who fixed toilets while she was a diplomat who shaped relations between worlds. But he was more scared of not trying, more scared of letting this chance pass because he was afraid. He thought about the future. He did not know what it held. He did not know if this would work, if they were too different, if the galaxy would accept a human and a together. But he wanted to find out. He wanted to take that risk, because she was worth it. The room was completely silent. Jake opened his eyes. Every in the room had bowed their head. It was a gesture of profound respect, he remembered. They had heard him. They had heard everything. Was looking at him. Her eyes were bright with moisture, tears that her people rarely showed. Her colors were shifting rapidly, purple and gold and something else, something warm and deep. "Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you know what you just did?" He shook his head. "I just thought about you, about us." "You shared more than a thought. You shared your entire heart, your hopes, your fears, your insecurities, your dreams, everything." She stepped closer to him. "Among my people, that is not just a courtship declaration. That is a bond of the deepest kind. You have offered yourself completely, without protection, without reservation." Jake swallowed hard. "Is that okay? Was it too much?" Laughed through her tears. "It was beyond belief. It was more than I ever expected, more than I ever dared to hope." She reached up and touched the side of his face. "Now it is my turn." She closed her eyes. Jake could not hear thoughts the way her people could, but he felt something. A warmth spreading through him, starting from where her hand touched his cheek. Images and feelings flooded into his mind, shared through the connection of the device he wore. He felt her surprise when she first heard his thoughts, her annoyance that turned to curiosity, her growing respect for humans, for him, her fear of caring about someone so different, her joy when she realized she did not want to stop. He felt her hope, her trust, her belief that he was worth taking a chance on. And underneath it all, soft and warm and real, he felt something that might be the beginning of love. When she opened her eyes, they were both crying. The elder spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "The bond is witnessed. The courtship is affirmed. May your path together be blessed by the stars." The room erupted in applause. Humans and together, celebrating something that had never happened before. A union born from an accident, grown through curiosity and sealed with honesty. She looked at him. "So," he said, "what happens now?" She smiled, that beautiful smile he had come to cherish. "Now we begin, together." She took his hand, and they walked off the platform into their new future. And it had all started because Jake thought someone had a nice butt. Sometimes the universe has a strange sense of humor.